Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to dive into something pretty interesting. The drone sightings that kind of took over the internet around Christmas 2019.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, they were everywhere. And, well, we're going to try to unpack it all for you. We've got two main sources this time around.
Okay.
First, we've got Hank Green's breakdown on the Vlogbrothers YouTube channel. It's
Hmm.
called Fine, I'll Talk About the Drones. And then second, there's this little note I found about a podcast episode idea somebody had about these sightings.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what do you think it is about these drone sightings that makes them so fascinating, even now? There's like this mix of misinterpretation and maybe something genuinely mysterious that's hard to shake off.
Yeah, you're right. It's like they really captured people's imaginations. And I think Hank Green's video does a great job of laying out those early reports, all those descriptions of what people were seeing.
Right, like the blinking lights and how big they were.
Exactly. Unidentified objects in the sky described as having blinking lights. Maybe a 6-foot wingspan flying in formations of like 6 to 10, mostly between 7 and 10 p.m. It's definitely like a classic mystery setup.
Totally. And then it gets even crazier when you add in things like this quote from Hank Green's video. Law enforcement officials stated that the size and number of drones makes it unlikely that they are being operated by hobbyists. Like, whoa! Suddenly it feels like we're in an X-Files episode.
I know, right? The authorities kind of poured gasoline on the fire with that one.
Yeah.
By suggesting these might not be just some regular hobbyist drones, it tapped into that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And the timing of it all, Christmas 2019, when everyone's already kind of on edge and expecting something magical, it was like the perfect recipe for a whole lot of paranoia.
Yeah, for sure. But you know what really gets me about this whole thing? How fast everyone started saying car-sized drones.
Oh.
I mean, I totally fell for it at first.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's crazy how repetition can like distort reality. Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of so much information. So we use these shortcuts to help us process it all.
Right, like mental heuristics.
Yeah, exactly. And one of those is the availability heuristic.
Yeah.
Basically, we tend to think things are more likely if we can easily remember examples of them.
So the more we heard car-sized drones, the more we believed it, even if there wasn't much proof.
Exactly. And then throw in the media, who are always looking for a sensational story, and things really get out of hand.
Because what's more exciting than giant mysterious drones over our cities?
Right. It's like a story that writes itself.
Yeah.
And then you have politicians like Congressman Jeff Andrew jumping in, even saying there was a possible Iranian mothership off the coast of New Jersey.
Like, seriously, an Iranian mothership.
I know. He did end up taking it back, but the damage was done. And then you had former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan tweeting a video of what he thought were drones, but turned out to be just stars.
He mistook stars for drones.
Huh. It just goes to show how powerful our expectations can be. We see what we expect to see. Hank Green makes this great comparison to a loaf of bread experiment. People can easily spot a loaf of bread in a kitchen, but struggle to see it in a barn because their brains aren't expecting it there.
So with the drones, we were already primed to see something strange, something maybe dangerous. And that combined with the media frenzy and the whole car size thing made
Yeah.
it so easy to misinterpret things.
Yeah, it was like a perfect storm of cognitive biases and media hype. We were basically set up to believe the drone myth, even without much real evidence.
Okay, but what about those videos that showed like orbs moving around the drones?
Yeah.
That's when things start to get really spooky, right?
Yeah, those are interesting. But even those orbs have a pretty simple explanation. It's probably something called circles of confusion. Basically, when a point of light is out of focus, it can show up as a blurry circle or orb on camera.
So those weird lights could be just like atmospheric stuff or even smudges on the lens.
Exactly. And when you add in people being all worked up and looking for something out of the ordinary, it's easy to see how those circles of confusion could be seen as something much weirder.
It's like our imagination's going into overdrive.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the possibility of hoaxes too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Whenever something like this blows up, you're going to have people trying to get in on the action, whether it's for fame or money or just to mess with everyone.
And that just makes it even harder to figure out what's real and what's fake.
You got it. And those hoaxes chip away at our trust in information. It's a vicious cycle.
Oh, this is a good one. Hank Green mentions that the initial description of these drone sightings is almost exactly the same as the Wikipedia entry for the 2019-2020 Colorado drone sightings.
No, interesting.
And those turned out to be mostly misidentified planes, stars, planets, or just small recreational drones.
Wow, so 2 events, same time of year, similar descriptions, and both basically coming down to misinterpretations and hoaxes.
Right. Is that just a crazy coincidence, or is there something more to it?
It's definitely weird.
Hmm.
Makes you wonder if there's a seasonal thing happening. Christmas is a time when people are already feeling more wonder and anticipation.
True.
Could that make people more likely to see things in the sky that aren't really there?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just a bunch of people getting new drones for Christmas and trying them out.
That's possible too. But it's interesting to think about how our culture influences how we see these things. Like if this happened in July, would it have been such a big deal?
Probably not.
Yeah.
There's something about the holidays with all the lights and the magic that makes people more open to believing in the extraordinary.
Yeah, it's like we're all primed for a good story, a little bit of wonder to break up the everyday routine.
And in a way, these drone sightings gave us that, a peek into something unknown, a chance to use our imaginations and think about the possibilities.
But they also show us how important it is to be careful about what we believe, especially with stories that play on our fears and desires.
Because ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what to believe, to look at the evidence and come to our own conclusions.
And that's a pretty powerful idea. We don't have to just passively take in information. We can be active in searching for truth, even if it turns out to be more complicated than we thought. It's like we're programmed to look for patterns, even when there's not much there.
And that can really mess with us, especially now with how fast misinformation spreads.
It's almost like an instinct. Something weird happens, we don't get it right away, and boom, our brains start filling in the gaps with the most exciting or even scary stuff.
Yeah, totally. It's so easy to get sucked into a story like that, especially when it's all about mystery and cover-ups.
Right, and that's where critical thinking is so important. Taking a step back and asking yourself some questions. Like, what's the actual evidence? What are the biases? Are there other explanations we're missing?
It's like we're almost scared to say, I don't know. Like it means we're not smart or something.
But it's actually the opposite. Being okay with, I don't know, opens up so many possibilities. It lets us look at information with a more critical and open mind.
That's a great point. So maybe the real challenge here isn't just figuring out the drone sightings, but learning to be comfortable with that uncertainty.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, can be a starting point for learning.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about being humble, admitting when we don't have all the answers, and being curious to learn more.
Because ultimately, that's what drives us forward, right? That desire to know more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And with these drone sightings, there's still a lot we don't know. Were some of them just planes or stars? Definitely were some hoaxes, probably. But were all of them explainable? That's where it gets interesting.
Right. Even if we get rid of the car-sized drone idea and all the crazy theories, there's still something mysterious there that we can't ignore.
And that's what's so cool about these kinds of events. They make us think critically, question what we believe, and realize that we don't always see things clearly.
They remind us that the world is full of strange and amazing things, and that we may never have all the answers.
And sometimes the best ending to a mystery isn't a simple solution, but a deeper understanding of how our minds work and how complex the world is.
Okay, but let's go back to those Colorado drone sightings for a sec. It's just so weird to me that both events happened at the same time, has similar descriptions, and ended up being misinterpretations and hoaxes. It feels like more than a coincidence.
It's definitely strange. It makes you wonder if there's something about the time of year. We talked about how Christmas is a time of excitement and anticipation.
Yeah.
Could that make people more likely to misinterpret what they see in the sky?
Maybe, or maybe it was just a bunch of people with new drones for Christmas.
Could be. But it's interesting how our culture shapes how we see things. Like, if this happened in July, would it have been such a big deal?
Probably not. There's something about the holidays with all the lights and the feeling of magic that makes people want to believe in something extraordinary.
It's like we're all ready for a good story, a little bit of wonder to break up the everyday routine.
And the drone sightings gave us that in a way.
Mm.
They gave us a glimpse into something unknown, a chance to use our imaginations and think about what could be out there.
But they also remind us to be careful about what we believe, especially when it comes to stories that play on our fears and hopes.
Because in the end, it's up to each of us to decide what we believe, to look at the evidence and make up our own minds.
And that's a really empowering idea. We don't have to just blindly accept information. We can be active in searching for truth, even if it's more complicated than we thought.
You know, it makes you think, after all this about the drones and everything, what other stuff is out there where just saying, I don't know, could have saved everyone a lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah. I bet there are tons of examples, probably all through history and even just in our everyday lives. I mean, think about it. How often do we feel like we have to have an answer right away? Take a side even if we don't know all the facts.
It's like we're afraid to admit we're not sure about something. Like saying, I don't know is a bad thing.
But it's not. It's the opposite, really. Being okay with I don't know is how you start to actually learn and discover new things. It helps you look at stuff with a more open mind.
That's true. So maybe the real takeaway here isn't just about these drone sightings, but about learning to be okay with not knowing everything.
Yeah, that, I don't know, can be a starting point.
Exactly. Like it's the beginning of a new adventure.
I love that. It's about being humble enough to admit when you don't have all the answers and being curious enough to want to find out more.
Because that's what keeps us going right. That
Yeah.
wanting to know more.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And even with these drone sightings, there's still so much we don't know for sure.
right.
I mean, some were definitely just planes or stars or whatever,
Mm.
and some were probably hoaxes, but were all of them explainable? Now that's the real mystery.
Yeah, that's the part that keeps me thinking.
And that's what makes these things so fascinating. They make you think critically and question everything. And sometimes you realize you don't see things as clearly as you thought you did.
It reminds us that the world is a pretty weird and awesome place,
Mhm.
and that some things we might never fully understand.
And sometimes the best part isn't finding a neat little answer, but just appreciating how much we don't know and how complex everything is.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the drone mystery. Thanks for hanging out with us and exploring all this weirdness. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about thinking critically and being open to the unknown.
And hey, next time you run into something strange or something that doesn't make sense, don't be afraid to just say, I don't know. Who knows? It might lead you to something amazing.
That's great advice. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.